Hey guys, it's me, Amaterasu, back with another part 2, Tenshikage Naruto, aka, what if Naruto built his own village? But without further ado, roll the intro.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Boys, my wheels got in my bag and I got all my feels. I'm getting this paper, I'm stacking a meal. I'm with your hoe in the house on the hills. Yeah. I'ma keep it real, at the sacrifice to try to get my bands up. Shorty wanna fuck with me, she see me on the camera. She said she in love with me, but really I can't stand her. She just want part of this life cause she see me on the ground.
Chapter 8, The Magnificent Mabry. The toad on her bed disappeared in a puff of smoke, its message delivered. Tsunade smiled incredulously and let tears form in her eyes. The boy was safe. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and flung on her robe. It was early, the sun had just come up, but she knew where her newest apprentice would be. As she walked out of the modest hut settled in the hills of the fire country, she heard the sounds of Sakura practicing. She stood at the doorway to watch for a few seconds. Sakura was oblivious to Tsunade's presence. She cocked her hands to her sides in the traditional horse stance and prepared her chakra. She felt it swelling to her fists and she unleashed her right fist into the large boulder that eclipsed her. It hit with a solid whoomph and apos. Dust and rubble flew from the point of impact, leaving a hole much larger than the impact her fist should have made. Ever since Tsunade had shown her the secret of the Futi no Kiwami, she'd been practicing it. Days, weeks, months had gone by. She concentrated on the process again in her head. Basically a double impact hit. The first punch with the proximal interphalangeal joint neutralizes the hardness of the target. Then the second blow, struck with the proximal phalanx, breaks the target before it recovers from the force of the first blow. Of course this all needed to be done in milliseconds so that to the naked or even trained eye, it looks like one hit. She released her breath and hit with the left fist this time. A similar puff of dust and pebbles erupted out of the boulder. Sakura allowed herself a small smile. She was getting there. She was getting stronger. Sakura. Tsunade called out to her. Come over here, I have something to tell you. Jiraiya landed with a thump in Tengoku, the river of wind getting no easier for the Sannin to traverse. He grumbled as he picked himself up and looked back the way he came. I need to do something about making that entrance easier. And more secure too. He hefted the bag on his shoulder and walked over to where he could see the tower being built in the distance. The steel beams that framed the structure were all up. The first floor had been completed and work was moving ahead briskly on the second. Even with all of Naruto's clones, this was as far as they'd gotten in 2 months. Well, to be fair, they had needed to split the clones amongst the water plant, the wind turbines and the tower construction. Still, the tower was beginning to look impressive. Massive white stone walls lined the first floor. An intricate design was laid into the floor which Jiraiya could have sworn was marble. Guerrero was really a genius with his hands. It was in here that they all slept now, sleeping bags scattered over to one side of the massive room. The second floor was supposed to have bedrooms for them all, even if they would have to share the one bathroom they had planned for that floor. Jiraiya grinned. They had all been so excited at the prospect of indoor plumbing once again. Hey! He called out to one of the busy Naruto clones. Where's the real one and everyone else? The clone stopped and lowered the tools in his hands. Jiraiya noticed that as usual, Naruto was bareback. But this time he saw that he had grown in height a little bit, and that his muscles had gotten harder and bigger. All the manual labor was really paying off in strengthening his body, and that was translating into his clones. Well, Naruto and Senji took a break, so they went to train down at the grounds. Tenchi and a bunch of us clones are running underground cables for the electricity, and Tazuna and Inari are running pipelines for the water plant into the tower. We're all really excited about being able to shower soon. With that, Naruto picked up his tools and joined back in the work on the second floor. Jiraiya turned on his heels and headed down to where Naruto and Senji would be training. They had come to call it the training grounds, but it was really just a large flat meadow right outside of where they had mapped out the village they were building would be. Before he arrived, he heard the sounds of the training through the trees. Ready, Naruto? Senji's voice called out loudly. Let her rip. Naruto's voice then called out. Second later, Jiraiya heard a whistle as something flew through the air, after which a loud boom resonated through the meadow. He walked into the meadow and saw Naruto at one side, palms facing forward. Senji stood at the other side of the meadow laughing. Good block, Naruto. Ready? He asked again. Jiraiya watched in interest. Senji grasped his blades and in one swift move sliced towards Naruto, causing a slash of energy and air to hurl towards him. The Sannin was alarmed until he saw Naruto grin and calmly push his palms forward and release a counter barrier of chakra and air. The two collided with an explosive force that had wind whipping at Jiraiya's face. Those two are either going to kill each other, or going to be the strongest warriors in the world. Jiraiya frowned, honestly not knowing which option it would be. Hey brat. Jiraiya called out. Naruto and Senji waved at Jiraiya and walked over. That wind affinity is really coming along, isn't it? And quat. He said matter-of-factly. Naruto nodded. Yeah, it's getting easier to convert my chakra to wind. I can almost feel the wind around me too. I don't know if it's because of where we are, in the windy place, but I can swear I'm almost feeling it all over me all the time. Jiraiya frowned. If Naruto was beginning to feel the air, it wouldn't be long before he started to feel the chakra all around him. This sort of development was too fast. He hadn't made any arrangements to begin sage training. He might need to step up his schedule to prevent his prized pupil from turning into a frog statue. Keep practicing boys. And quat. Jiraiya turned to go. I'll talk to you tonight. And quat. He walked off determined to have a talk with Pa Toad very soon. That night, as they sat around a small fireplace in the ground floor of the tower, Jiraiya relayed news to them. Okay, so I've begun spreading rumors of Tengoku. My spy network is in full effect, looking for any clans who are in need of protection and somewhere to go. Everyone greeted this with nods of approval. Ever since they had come here, they had been discussing the purpose of the village, and Naruto was most insistent that they protect the innocent, and shield those who needed it. He very much remembered what it was like to be persecuted and hated. I've also gotten in touch with Tsunade. She will be joining us with her apprentices soon. And quat. He looked curiously at Naruto. Naruto, one of her apprentices is Sakura. After you were banished, Sakura abandoned Konoha and begged Tsunade to train her. Naruto was startled. He had thought of his friends back in Konoha often, but not once did he think he'd be seeing one again so soon. He couldn't help but smile at that. So I've asked Tsunade to get in touch with someone I've used many times. She's far closer to his last location than I am. Who's that? Tenchi asked curiously. The fire crackled as Senji fed it another stick. Jiraiya chuckled softly. Why, the magnificent Milford Mabry, that's who. And quat. Tenchi groaned and Naruto gasped. I remember him. Naruto smiled widely. He had done a free magic show for us when we were at the orphanage. He was great. Tenchi sighed. Yes, Milford Mabry. And quat. He groaned again to himself. Naruto was explaining to Senji and Inari how this lady was sawed in half. Then her feet began kicking in the box. That charlatan would indeed be useful. Naruto stopped his animated description and turned back to the discussion. How is a magician going to help us? He glanced at the Kazuma clan and wondered if maybe a magic show to raise spirits was what Jiraiya had planned? Mabry is a find-it man. And quat. Jiraiya explained. Anything you need, no matter how rare it is, he can find it and supply it. I want to use him to set up supply lines for Tengoku. Food, medicine, clothing, basic necessities as well as anything special we may need. Oh, Naruto nodded in understanding. Moving on, I stopped in Getai village and had these made up. And quat. He tossed the first thing he pulled out of his bag at Naruto, who caught it effortlessly. It was a head protector with the symbol of Tengoku on it. Naruto held it tightly, 100 emotions going through him. He remembered the feeling when his own headband was denied him after being banished. The feeling he had when Iruka had given him his headband personally. It felt wrong to put on a headband to replace the Konoha one. He looked up at everyone watching him. Naruto steeled his face and tied the band to his left arm, symbol facing out. They all seemed to understand. As Jiraiya passed them around, Senji, Tenchi, Guerrera, Tora Kazumo, they all put on the bands on their left arm instead of their foreheads. The Kazumo children looked like they wanted the symbol themselves. But old man Tora explained to them how it was a symbol that only qualified warriors should wear. After they finish his basic training, they could get bands of their own. Naruto smiled, remembering his own eagerness to earn the Konoha leaf headband. The pride he felt when he earned it was so tangible. Jiraiya smiled at the small family and how they supported Naruto. He slipped one more band out of the bag and tied it to his own arm. Good, we are now officially archangels. And quat. He said tongue-in-cheek. They all laughed. Old man Tora though stopped and asked a question. Wait, speaking of that, do we want Tengoku to be recognized officially as a hidden ninja village by the other villages? They all went silent as they thought about that. Naruto hadn't thought about it at all. I'd say, Jiraiya spoke first, that eventually we would want that, but we're a good few years away from that being possible. We should focus on building a strong village first, before we try to approach the other villages for recognition. We do need to build our reputation though. Reputation? Naruto asked. Senji explained it to him. Our village is unknown, so we won't get jobs that hidden villages get normally. Protection jobs, assassinations, the normal stuff. Like what we were doing before, You and I, as freelancers. Jiraiya nodded. Yes, building the structures is important work, but so is building the reputation of our warriors. My spy network is already whispering the name Tengoku, but we need displays of prowess. Tenchi looked at the younger warriors seriously. That means that you Naruto and you Senji must take some more jobs and execute them flawlessly. I think one job per month, so that you can split your time between here, building the village and outside, building the name. Either I, or Jiraiya will arrange these jobs for you. I think we can scrounge up work with our contacts? He looked at Jiraiya, who grinned in approval and held up one finger. Good, that's settled. You will leave on your first mission in a week's time. In a deep cave far away in the land of sound, a sallow face split into a large grin as he stalked the hall, slithering his way to the dimly lit room where his newest apprentice was practicing. A dark chuckle escaped his thin pale lips as he saw the progress the young one was making with the help of the cursed seal and a few other minor adjustments he and Kabuto were doing to him. The news he had just heard would add fuel to an already promising fire. Sasuke. He said, barely audibly. We have heard a rumor of your old teammate, Naruto. The voice trailed out into a fit of otherworldly giggles. Sasuke grumbled. What do I care? He continued to swing his katana at the practice post. Orochimaru grinned. The rumor is he single-handedly wiped out an entire city filled with marauding pirates in his anger. That his anger was so righteous, that he smote them into oblivion with a wave of his hand. He giggled madly again. I guess you have a long way to go to catch up to him. He watched intently as the emotions played across Sasuke's face. Shock, disbelief, jealousy, anger, and finally resolve. Sasuke tackled the post harder with the next swing, and the next, and the next. Orochimaru chuckled to himself and closed the door to the training room. Jiraiya eyed the entrance to the wind tunnel. Securing this entryway was a high priority, but a task he was loath to do. It would require countless hours of seal making to get his idea just right, and he was no seal master. This would have to be temporary. He sat down determinedly, and began to sketch out the first array of seals. Just then, a shadow fell across him and a familiar voice greeted him. Senji hefted the next large square stone onto his shoulders and took the steps to where it needed to go. He deposited it shortly thereafter on the pulley system they had rigged up. With a sigh of relief as the weight was no longer on his back, he wiped the sweat from his brow and looked up. The sun was blazing down on them. He knew it was all in his mind, but he could have sworn that they were remarkably close to the sun, being this high up in the sky, as it mercilessly beat down upon them. Suddenly he felt a presence coming at him from behind. He bent at the waist backwards just as the sound of a whip cracked where his head was a second ago. He twisted and landed on all fours, drawing his knees to his chest and springing forward towards his assailant. He didn't recognize who the intruder was, a warrior who had a long red scarf around his neck, oddly shaped robes tucked into double-toed soft shoes. The whip that had come close to hitting him was no whip, but the scarf itself. There was something familiar about the enemy. Senji's lunge was blocked by a raised leg and the unknown warrior settled into a pose holding the scarf that Senji recognized immediately. He rolled in the dust and sprang back up. Shit. Kair Kengeki. His swords were far away, so this was going to be a hard fight. However, he had no intention of fighting back. His recognition of the fighting style led to his realization of his attacker. Hiraka? He whispered under his breath as his attacker whipped the scarf towards him. It moved impossibly fast. Senji could have sworn the material stretched beyond what it should have been able to. He ducked under it only to see it fold down and come after him. He spun out of the way, whirling his legs around to land on his back a yard to the left. He knew that the Kair Kengeki user infused chi, or as Naruto called it chakra, into their weapon, which was always a form of cloth. Harmless looking, yet deadly. The edge of the impossibly long scarf sliced into the ground where he lay seconds earlier, leaving a large cut in the earth. Senji let a drop of sweat fall from his forehead. If that had hit him. Hey, what are you doing? A Naruto clone shouted at the attacker. 3 other clones came around the building then and saw what was going on. The attacker cursed and lashed out with the scarf. It billowed out, unfolding like a sail. As the Naruto clones charged, the scarf split into sections, each one impaling a clone in the arm, legs. Not a deadly wound if it was a person, but enough to make them erupt into puffs of smoke because they were clones. The intruder turned back to Senji who had gotten up, but hadn't attacked. Listen Hiraka, he started to say. The tail end of the scarf hit him in the midsection, knocking the wind out of him. He flew backwards, looking on helplessly as strips of cloth snaked their way around him, binding his arms and legs. He hit the dirt trussed up like a turkey, the attacker jumping impossibly high into the air, other strips of cloth billowing behind her. She looked like a winged demon with the cloth forming wings behind her as she twisted and turned, to plummet heel first towards Senji's tied up form. He rolled to the side just barely enough for her foot to graze his forehead but not crush it. It was enough, however, to knock him unconscious. The attacker stood proudly over Senji, bending down to grasp his face. 15 Naruto clones exploded into the attacker, tackling her to the ground. When at least 2 Narutos were holding arms, legs, head, pinning the attacker to the dirt, only then did Naruto ask, "What the hell is going on?" Naruto ripped the mask off the intruder, to find a beautiful Chinese girl, probably 18 or 19 years old, muttering curses at him and spitting. Dai Lumaozi. She writhed against the restraints of Naruto's hands. Kao ni Niang. A long string of words that Naruto did not understand, but got the general idea were not very nice followed. Jiraiya and Tenchi walked into the clearing, laughing. Tenchi walked up to the struggling attacker. Such bad language. And quat. His face stern. Behave yourself, daughter. Tsunade, Shizune and Sakura entered the town to the sound of carnival music filtering its way down to them. The townspeople all looked jovial and excited. Tsunade scowled. We're in the right place. And quat. She motioned to the center of the small town where a large brightly colored wagon towered above the gathered crowd. In front of the wagon was a tall gangly man, garishly dressed in a bright turquoise top hat with a matching jacket. His waistcoat was the color of gold, gleaming in the midday sun. The only thing that could have been any brighter was the smile on his face, teeth gleaming at the gathered crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a trick, this is. His fingers flash and a large bouquet of flowers appears in his hand. Magic. The crowd claps appreciatively, children laughing at the display. Sakura turned to look at Tsunade, confused. Did he just do a summoning jutsu in his hands without blood? Sakura asked. Tsunade shook her head in disgust. No, Mabry doesn't know any jutsus, or have any chakra capacity or control. He's just a sleight of hand artist, the best you're ever likely to see. He's also the best supplier in the named world. They sat down to watch the show as Mabry flourished pigeons, blew fire, levitated a child from the crowd, and sawed his assistant in half. The crowd ate it up. Sakura marveled at the showmanship of the magician. He had them eating out of his hands. They cheered, laughed, and called for more when the show was finally over. He thanked them all and went behind the curtain into his massive wagon. Tsunade and Shizune got up, so Sakura followed suit. They walked through the happy dispersing crowd to the curtains. A very large woman blocked their path. She sported short bristled blonde hair, tattoos up down both arms, and one eyebrow that extended over both eyes. She was indeed a fearsome looking creature. Tsunade walked right up to her face. There was an instant of recognition on the bodyguard's face. Mistress Tsunade? There was a question in her voice. Sakura saw a flash of fear, then a look of resolve. You cannot go in. Mr. Mabry specifically told me if I ever saw you again. The bodyguard had no time to finish the sentence because Tsunade had grabbed the front of her shirt and lifted, then threw her to the side, sailing into a nearby water fountain. Tsunade, Shizune and Sakura walked through the curtains into the wagon of the magnificent Milford Mabry. He sat at a simple wooden table, drinking what Sakura guessed was scotch, looking all the while like he was waiting for Tsunade. He flashed her a half-hearted smile and poured himself another drink. I saw you in the back of the crowd earlier. Thanks for not disrupting the show. The kids were really enjoying it. And quat. His voice was somber and not at all like the personality on display outside. So how many did you find this time? Tsunade asked, sitting down opposite him at the table. The creak of the wooden chairs competing with the tinkle of nearby chimes for the only sound in the room. 13 homeless children. 5 severely beaten. My boys are out looking for the runner now. And quat. He said, anger clear in his voice. Sakura looked baffled between Mabry and Tsunade. They clearly knew each other. Tsunade saw Sakura's puzzled expressions and sighed. Mabry here runs a home for homeless children. He takes exceptionally good care of them, raising any child from infancy until he's ready to leave or stay behind and help out. Most chose to stay. He's been doing this for, 20 years? He cleared his throat. 22 actually. And quat. He turned to look at Sakura. See, I was an orphan myself. I had to endure beatings and being on the street. Then I was taken in by who I thought was a kind man. He was a child runner. They sell children into slavery, prostitution, begging. It's a cruel, torturous life for a child. Realization washed over Sakura. So you travel from town to town looking for children to save? Her face cracked a wide smile of genuine affection. You're a really nice man. He shook his head in disgust. No, I'm not. At that moment 2 younger men came bursting into the wagon, throwing a greasy-looking man onto the floor at the feet of Mabry. He looked down at the sniveling man dressed in what looked like hand-me-down finery. A whip lay curled at his belt. Mabry's eyes narrowed and he gave a sharp intake of breath. He grabbed the man by his throat and lifted him to his feet. You use that whip on the kids you enslave? He asked it barely a whisper. Sakura watched as the child runner pissed himself. I guess facing an adult is a lot scarier than facing a child. She turned to ask Tsunade a question when the sharp crack of a slap rang through the room. Mabry had backhanded the man across his face. The blow left a large red welt on the man's face. The man reached for his whip. Sakura was about to intervene when Tsunade grabbed her wrist. She shook her head at Sakura, signaling to let Mabry deal with it. Mabry lifted the man even higher with his one hand on his throat. The child runner's feet no longer touched the wooden floor of the wagon room. Dax, Kano and Quat. He called out to the two young men who dragged the man inside. Make sure that the children he beat up see his corpse on the nearest tree. And Quat. With that he snapped the man's neck with his one hand and flung the body to the two men. They quickly picked it up and left the tent. Mabry stalked back to the table and drank the rest of his scotch. So to what do I owe the pleasure of your visit, my lady Tsunade? He said with a small bow. Tsunade cleared her throat. We have a proposition for you. Mabry took his hat off and put it on a rack. We? Jiraiya and I. She continued. And his apprentice, Naruto. Mabry stiffened. Naruto? Jiraiya? Is this Naruto from Konoha? Sakura was startled. You know Naruto? Mabry cursed under his breath. 7 years ago I tried to take Naruto away from Konoha. He was beaten up, neglected. He would have done well away from such a bad environment. But the Hokage stopped me himself. Said Naruto was too valuable to the village and had to remain. We got into an actual fight over it. And Quat. He took off his shirt. A long white scar ran diagonally across his chest. That's how I got this scar. The old goat was better than I thought. Sakura didn't know what else to say. This man had fought the Hokage, over the well-being of Naruto, a then child who he hadn't known anything about beyond being neglected? So what's the proposal? He asked as he pulled out another shirt from a cabinet and began to put it on. Tsunade smiled. We'd like you to set up a supply line to heaven. And Quat. Senji woke up several hours later. Night had fallen and they were all talking and laughing with the young lady who had intruded on their camp earlier. He sat up, rubbing his temple. Ow Hirika, he grimaced. Why do you have to play so rough? The girl in question threw a look his way. I had to make sure my ex-fiancé hadn't gotten weak. Naruto sighed audibly. He didn't understand exactly what was going on. No one was telling him anything. Senji sulked off into the darkness to wash the blood off his face. Naruto followed him to make sure he was alright. He caught up to him by the edge of the lake. So? Your ex-fiancé, huh? Naruto asked awkwardly, grinning like an idiot and rubbing the back of his head. Senji grumbled and splashed the water on his face. Yeah, Tenshi's daughter. And Quat. He bent down to the lake again and cupped his hands in the moonlight. The only woman I've ever loved and will ever love. And I can never marry her. And Quat. Senji said with a finality that left no room for more questions. Naruto didn't ask, just sat with his friend as they stared up at the moon, which seemed impossibly close. Mabry cracked his whip over the 4 gigantic donkeys pulling his wagon. He waved down to Tsunade, Sakura, and Shizune. Remember our deal, Tsunade. You hold up your end, and I'll do my part. And Quat. He grinned and took off his hat, waving it to the crowd of people cheering as he slowly drove off. The townsfolk only saw a great entertainer. Shizune scowled and looked at Tsunade. Why would you agree to that? How are we going to manage that? She asked incredulously. Sakura agreed. It seemed like an almost impossible task all things considered. Tsunade shook her head. It will be fine. Step 1, we find Mabry's orphanage using the map he gave us. Step 2, we transport the entire building to Tenshikage, as well as every boy, girl and baby in the place. How hard can that be? She asked with a glint in her eyes. Why, I bet we can make it in 1 week. Konoha Shino leaned against the door nodding his head as Ino spoke to him. To anyone passing, it was just 2 teammates chatting in the evening after a day of missions. A more wary and observant eye may have noticed that neither seemed completely at ease, or they may have noticed that Shino had several bugs scattered in a block radius. The 2 teens were standing guard over that night's meeting of Naruto's army. Ever since the debacle that was the daimyo's visit, the village had been a powder keg, just waiting to explode. Citizens and ninja alike were embarrassed by their Hokage Danzo. He had brought much shame to Konoha. Danzo himself had gone on a rampage looking for the source of his harassment, blaming Naruto's army for it all. The demon sympathizers would be captured and punished. Even Naruto's army had no idea how it had happened, but the cage bunshine that hit the daimyo and Danzo did look like Naruto, and that was Naruto's favorite jutsu. But public opinion had turned. Danzo had no support for the common populace. He was now ruling with an iron fist. All semblance of democracy was slowly being peeled away. The council themselves were due to meet to discuss the situation. The general feeling and rumor was that they were going to remove Danzo. Inside the meeting room, Kakashi had his Sharingan exposed. In case anyone got past the guards outside, he would immediately notice anything out of the ordinary. Tonight, the clan heads and the village elders will vote on Danzo's leadership abilities. And Quat. Shinomura announced to the gathered Jinan, Chunin, and Jounin. I have it on good advice that the Hyugas are withdrawing their support for Danzo. They are one clan that does not handle embarrassment well. Hinata nodded at that statement. She had overheard similar discussions, very heated ones, at her clan home. Danzo would be aware of this, and has to be planning something. He's a very smart political animal. Kakashi nodded. Just then his Sharingan I picked up on Lee arriving outside and saw as both Lee and Ino ran through the doors into the room. Ino panted as she let the words spill out. The village elders have been assassinated. Danzo has declared martial law. The Anbu are looking for the murderer Hatake Kakashi! And quat. Chapter 9, The Inquisition. Naruto strapped on his white sandals. He had finally gotten over his orange fetish and accepted that as a warrior of Tengoku he would wear white. The straps on the sandals snapped into place. He straightened up and ran his fingers through his hair. It had been almost 8 months since he'd left Konoha and he hadn't had a haircut since. His spiky blonde hair was longer now, bushier, spikier if that was possibly. Naruto looked at himself in the mirror, one of the many supplies brought back in their material expeditions. He didn't look 13, well at least he didn't think so. His body had started to harden up from all the manual labor. He had grown a few inches as well. It was certainly not the same Naruto who left Konoha with nowhere to go that stared back at him from the mirror. Naruto sighed and put on his white jacket over the white vest he had on. He left it unzipped and pushed the Tengoku armband up his left arm, tying it securely above his left bicep. He didn't bother with a shuriken holster since he'd learnt how to make senbon out of wind. He had an unlimited supply as long as he had chakra, and let's face it, he thought to himself, the one thing I have loads of is chakra. Naruto grabbed a largo bow staff he had gotten from Tenchi a few days ago. Don't go getting this one broken too, Naruto. And quat. Tenchi had warned him. It takes me a lot of time and effort to carve these to have the perfect balance and weight. I won't be making you another anytime soon. He took it to heart. Of course Tenchi failed to mention that standing not 10 feet away was Guerrero, who was chuckling to himself, remembering when he broke Naruto's staff. Naruto spun the bow around him, twirling it and then bringing it to a sudden stop with a thump to his right, the base of one end landing perfectly on the ground. Ready, he strode outside of the temporary room that he had chosen on the completed second floor of the tower. He nodded to some of his clones as he walked past them. He hoped his clones would last until he came back from this mission. There was still so much work to be done to prepare this village. He walked down the stairs to the ground floor where Jiraiya and Tenchi were waiting for him. He looked around but didn't see Senji anywhere. His new friend had been slightly different since Hiraka had shown up, more serious, less outgoing. It was to Naruto as if the Senji he knew had withdrawn into a shell. Naruto needn't have worried about Senji's whereabouts though. He appeared in the room besides him in a flash. Senji had shrugged off his usual black clothes and also donned a white uniform, very similar to Naruto's. Senji had explained that he had his own reputation as Senji the Darkblade, but that he didn't want to go against the new look of their village. He had sounded very proud when he used the words our village and quat. Naruto couldn't help but smile. Inasmuch Senji's clothes were now white, the style was much different from Naruto's. Senji wore what could pass as a monk's coat, except slim fitting. It was open to reveal a suit underneath, also all white. Not just any suit, but what Naruto would swear was a formal suit. Button-down shirt, slacks, shoes not sandals. Senji looked like he was going to some formal event. Naruto stood there in shock, mouth slightly agape. Senji looked at him and laughed. Well, we are representing the village, and as your bodyguard I thought I should look the part. We're going for being remembered here. Jiraiya nodded. He's right. In fact, this mission has no financial reward. Senji almost fainted. You mean this will be a freebie? He looked angrily between Tenchi and Jiraiya. I've worked years just to build up a reputation where I don't have to do freebies anymore. And now you want me to do it again? Jiraiya nodded with a smile. Yes, you may have a reputation, but Tengoku does not. And quat. He turned to Naruto. You will go to the city of Evora, which lies south of here in the plains of the unnamed country. Naruto, your clones have proven to be very useful. I've drawn a map of where the wind streams we've charted head. One passes a few miles west of Evora. Naruto nodded and looked at the map. It was at least a week's travel if they didn't use the wind stream. Unfortunately, he still hadn't found a river besides the main one to bring them back home. That meant a long trek back after they were done. Senji glanced at the map and noticed something. Hey, at least one major stream goes to each hidden village. That's an odd coincidence, isn't it? He said, half asking a question at the end. Tenchi nodded. Don't worry about that right now. Jiraiya and I are still theorizing about that. For now, just focus on your mission. Evora is a Puritan city. Its inhabitants believe in righteousness and a higher power. Because of this, any chi user or kekai genkai, for example, is considered a demon or devil. Jiraiya continued. They routinely hold unsuspecting visitors to their city, and spend hours interrogating them to see if they are indeed demons. This questioning is nothing more than torture designed to make people admit to anything, true or false. Sometimes they also raid nearby towns looking for demons to sacrifice to their god. They burn them at the stake. Naruto looked sick to his stomach. That people could be that cruel. So, Senji asked. He too looked a little pale. We rescue any captives? Jiraiya nodded. He then looked at Naruto. I want you to figure out a way to stop them from continuing this madness. If you can do it without destroying the city, then great, but if you must, use that wind blast you used on Sarakiel. Senji glanced nervously at Naruto for a split second before Jiraiya continued. And Naruto, if you can do it without going. Well, all foxy on us, that would be best. We're trying to get people behind us, not afraid of us. Naruto nodded, but he could already feel a lot of emotion inside him. Without a word, he and Senji flashed out the entrance and towards the wind stream that would take them on their mission. Jiraiya watched them go, a thoughtful frown on his face. Tenshi thought he could tell what he was thinking without having the gift of reading minds. They'll be safe. Senji is a strong warrior and he looks up to Naruto. They will protect each other. Jiraiya shook his head. No, I'm sure they'll be fine. I'm worried Naruto will go overboard and hurt someone he doesn't mean to. I don't think he's ready for that sort of guilt yet. Tenshi looked out the doorway, now also deep in thought. Naruto and Senji leapt into the stream. Naruto's clones had put a clear marker by the stream so it was easy to find. The familiar yet still odd sensation of flying overtook them. Naruto went headfirst this time, arms at his sides, bow staff strapped to his back, enjoying the feel of wind around his body, the weightlessness. Senji folded his arms and assumed a lotus position. His body language was very easy to read, very much not pleased with this mode of transportation. They sped across the morning sky, high enough that someone on the ground could not see them if they looked up unless they had a Sharingan or Byakugan, and then only as a dot traveling impossibly fast. The wind whipped around them, making conversation difficult. This was one of the faster streams that Naruto's clones had discovered so far. Within 30 minutes they neared the point at which they needed to leave the stream. Naruto glanced at Senji who nodded at him. Senji unfolded and grabbed onto Naruto's legs with one hand, essentially moving his body out of the way. Naruto faced back to where they had come from, and unleashed a palm thrust of chakra and wind. It was as powerful as he had used back in training to cancel Senji's blade slices. It was strong enough here to temporarily disrupt the stream and let them fall out of it. They had discussed this many times, how to get out of the stream. So Naruto was glad to see it work. However, the falling to the ground part he was not looking forward to. Jiraiya had said this method should work, Naruto thought. But if it doesn't we'll be pancakes. Senji seemed to have complete faith in Naruto as he shifted his body in mid-fall to be behind Naruto. Naruto faced the ground that was rushing up to them, and did the same move, but this time pumping a bit more chakra into it. The ground exploded just as they were about 20 feet above it. The concussive blast of the force acted as a cushion and actually pushed them back up slightly. Naruto and Senji used the push to flip and arc over the blast area, landing on their feet with a solid thump. Senji immediately fell to his knees. Thank the great Kami that worked. He exclaimed. Apparently his trust in Naruto was not 100% absolute. Naruto grinned. I knew it would. Senji scoffed. Yeah right. And quat. He looked back to where they almost landed. Hey look at that. Naruto turned and looked at what Senji was pointing at. As the dust settled, two huge handprints were embedded in the ground where they would have landed. Senji's face split into a smile. Well you've already left your mark on this area Naruto. He walked off towards the village laughing. Tsunade scowled as she looked at the ravine in front of her. Her patience had worn exceedingly thin. Walking miles and miles, even with the help of her slug summons, had been tiring. Of course, it was made worse with close to 200 children of different ages complaining for the entire trip. She swore, if one more snot-nosed brat asked her if they were there yet, so help her she would. Mistress Tsunade? Sakura's voice cut into her thoughts. What do we do from here? Tsunade sighed and grabbed Sakura by the shoulders. With a small heave, she chucked Sakura into the ravine. She trusted Jiraiya implicitly where things like this was concerned, so it wasn't really a dangerous thing to do to Sakura. And if she got hurt, Tsunade could always fix her herself being a medic nin and all that. Sakura shot like an arrow up the ravine and up into the clouds. Tsunade gave it a minute then nodded to herself. Sakura had not come crashing and screaming back to earth, so she guessed it was safe. She turned to the assorted children behind her. Okay form a line, and come here one at a time. And quat. An hour later, Tsunade herself burst through the clouds. She had let all the children come up first before tiredly jumping into the ravine herself. As she landed on her feet with a thump, she noticed immediately that Sakura had taken control along with Shizune and organized all the children into a single group. The kids seemed in awe of where they were. Undoubtedly many of them wondered if they were really in heaven and Apos. Jiraiya came walking over to smile at Tsunade. Glad you made it, he beamed at her, but where did you pick up the army of dwarves? He laughed at her frustrated growl. She half-heartedly tried to punch him but he dodged it well. She looked around at the island. Why, you weren't kidding. This place is amazing. And quat. She started to walk to the land and paused. Do you feel that? She asked Jiraiya. He frowned. He did have a weird feeling every time he was in Tengoku, but never bothered with it. He didn't like heights after all. Tsunade closed her eyes and breathed in deep. The crisp air felt cold against her lungs. Then she felt it again. Chakra, she said. She opened her eyes and looked around. You said this is where all the wind of the world starts and comes back to? The air here is thick with natural energy. And quat. Tsunade kept walking. She herself never wanted to master the sage arts. She much preferred the science of medicine. But that didn't mean that as a Sannin she couldn't feel natural energy around her. Jiraiya cursed himself for not noticing sooner. He was a sage, but never achieved perfect control. He really hadn't stopped to feel that energy around him. But now that Tsunade pointed it out, he couldn't help but feel it all around, invading his very pores. He cursed verbally now. Shit. Tsunade turned to look at him, her eyes coming off the village area under construction. What? Jiraiya shook his head. Naruto has begun to feel the natural energy too. Tsunade frowned. He's had no training, how could that be? He's a wind affinity, Jiraiya shrugged. I guess as the wind here is laced with energy he is starting to become sensitive to it. The problem here is that this much natural energy is dangerous. He hasn't had any training. I had already decided to talk to Pa Toad, but I think I better do it now. When Naruto comes back, he needs to start sage training. Tsunade nodded. She stopped walking in front the tower under construction, impressed in spite of herself. It was looking massive and impressive, the third floor under construction and the white stones glimmering in the sunlight. Okay, where do I unseal this damn orphanage? She asked, reaching behind her and pulling out a sealing box. That box had cost her a pretty penny, but it did manage to hold a building for 200 orphans. How did he manage it? Ino asked Shikamaru. News had spread fast of the murder of the two village elders. The Anbu and Root were both hunting Kakashi actively, so he had gone into hiding. Fortunately, enough Jounin were on the side of Naturo's army that hiding wasn't proving too difficult, yet. I'm not sure, Shikamaru replied. The coroner had declared both elders were killed by a lightning hand strike through their chests. In other words, by Kakashi's signature move, the Chidori. Since no one else in Konoha could execute that attack, except Sasuke, who was definitely not in Konoha, that left only one suspect. However he did it, there's no doubt Danzo is making the most of it. And quat. A state of emergency had been declared in Konoha, temporarily suspending the powers of the council. This effectively left Danzo as Hokage until the suspension was lifted. It was a brilliant strategy, Shikamaru had to admit, one he hadn't planned for. The other Konoha Jonin sat semi-dejectedly around the room. The Jounins were all out searching for Kakashi, so the original Naruto's army was meeting without them. It's illogical to continue analyzing. We don't have enough data. All we can do is look ahead. And quat. Shino said. Lee nodded. He was a man of action. All this thinking aggravated him. We need to get rid of Danzo, Lee said animatedly. Shikamaru nodded. Yes, but we're all Jonin. We need to get much stronger if we're to have any chance against Anbu or Root. And quat. He looked at the assembled ninja. When I look at us, you know what I see? I see the future of Konoha. I see the potential for greatness. Every man and woman in this room could be the best ninja Konoha has ever seen. We need to refocus our strategies. Shikamaru got up and began to pace the floor. Someone needs to infiltrate Danzo's office. That someone needs to earn his trust so we can have access to his plans. A spy? Kiba exclaimed. Shikamaru had a look of disgust on his face. Shh, that rules you out, Kiba. You're about as subtle as a rock to the face. And quat. A snicker from Neji and Lee. Shikamaru looked at each of their faces, studying them carefully. Why not you, Shika? Ino asked. Shikamaru shook his head. No, he'd be suspicious of me from the start. The Hokage has access to aptitude tests and I score very high. He'd be wary of me. No, we need someone he'd never suspect, but that he could find useful. He pointed at Ino. You Ino. Ah. She exclaimed. Me? Why? Your family abilities could be very useful to the Hokage's office. And you're a girl. Men typically underestimate women. Shika looked at everyone else. The rest of us have our own mission. We need to train. We need to get stronger. But don't let anyone know how strong we're getting. Shino nodded. That is sound logic. No one will see Jonin as a threat. And if we increase our abilities up to Chunin or even Jounin level, we'd have the tactical advantage. Shikamaru smiled. Yes, exactly. We don't know as yet what Danzo is planning, but we will, and we will be ready. Danzo chuckled. The latest report said that Kakashi still hadn't been found. That was good news as far as he was concerned. As long as Kakashi was out there, he was the perfect scapegoat. After all, who else could possibly learn the Chidori? He laughed out loud in the silence of his office, the Sharingan hidden behind the bandages on the left side of his face spinning madly. Naruto and Senji stared down at the village below them. From their vantage point on a hill outside of town, it was an impressive sight. This was like no village they had ever seen before. The buildings were huge and numerous. The town was easily twice as large as Konoha was. In the very center was a cathedral that towered above the other buildings, its bell towers reaching up like dark spires into the sky. Naruto shuddered. This place had a bad feeling to it. Okay, so how do we find the captives? Senji asked Naruto, not taking his eyes off the village. He didn't want anyone to take them by surprise. Not far from them were 2 guards on the west entrance to the village. Naruto scratched his head. Well, I guess the easiest thing to do is, ask? Senji turned to look at him puzzled. But Naruto had tossed his bow staff to Senji and then Hiraishin to right in front the guards. What the? One of the guards almost fell back on his ass. The other lowered his spear to point it at Naruto. Excuse me, Naruto asked innocently. Where do you hold chakra users like me? The guard who had almost fallen down threw a net over Naruto and they both pointed their spears at him. Ha! Caught you now, demon. Naruto bowed his head but looked back to where Senji was, hidden out of sight. Senji cursed until he caught sight of Naruto's smile. Damn that fool, he wanted to get caught so they would take him to the others. Senji muttered to himself about the recklessness of his friend, and decided to follow the captive Naruto as the guards marched him into the city at the point of their spears. He followed them jumping on rooftops, flash-stepping as fast as he could from chimney to chimney, trying to stay out of sight. He watched as they pushed Naruto and tripped him, making him fall to the cobblestone floor. They laughed and Senji had to try hard not to cut them to pieces where they stood. They led him straight into an ominous-looking building just short of the Grand Cathedral itself. With a word to the guards posted in front that building, they pushed Naruto inside and followed. Senji could no longer see what was happening. He sat down on the roof he was perched on and decided to give Naruto 1 day before he killed every man who was holding Naruto prisoner. Naruto smiled as the bars slammed shut behind him. The guards laughed and left without a glance backwards. They clearly underestimated him, Naruto thought. He looked around his new accommodation. A small 8x8 cell. It looked like stone floors and iron bars. Naruto could feel other eyes on him. In the cell next to him in the very darkest of shadows, he saw 2 feet sticking out. Hello? Naruto asked of the darkness. Who's there? I've come to rescue you. Ha ha ha. A young male voice came from the shadows. Some rescue attempt. And quat. There was a scraping noise and a figure emerged. It was a teenage boy, maybe 17 years old. He was the oddest looking boy Naruto had ever seen. For one thing, his skin was as black as his hair. His hair was thick and curly, in finger-length bunches. His clothes were frayed, in a brown tunic and beige slacks with a rope belt. He approached the bars and put his hands on them. So how exactly did you plan to rescue us? The boy glanced at Naruto's white clothing and snickered. I'll assume you are a magic user like the rest of us. But have you tried channeling since you entered the city? Naruto shrugged and did the hand seal for a shadow clone, just as he'd done thousands of times before. This time, however, it felt like a weight was resting on him, like a giant sponge had just hit him in the chest. Nothing happened. No smoke, no shadow clone, nothing. The boy nodded. See? The entire city is shrouded by a magic dampener. None of our techniques work. Naruto saw that there were more cells in the darkness, and each had 1 or several people in them. His eyes were getting used to the darkness. Men, women, children, all kinds were sitting or standing in their cells. The same look of hopelessness on all their faces. He clenched his fists in anger, the inhumanity getting to him. He sat down and tried to think of a way out of this without chakra. Senji woke up on the same rooftop he had been keeping watch. He yawned and scratched his neck. Tiled rooftop was not the most comfortable place in the world to fall asleep. He heard some guards talking about the demon cleansing ritual they would be holding today. Them damn demons will be sent back to hell. One clearly enlightened and educated man exclaimed. That's right. The next chimed in. The cleansing fire will send them back to the damnation from whence they came. Amen, brother. Sister Agnes assured me that I would get to light at least 1 pillar myself. You're kidding. What an honor. What did you have to do to gain such privilege? My cousin from the land of snow brought the new parts for the demon suppressor. I helped arrange it. And quat. The man said proudly. Senji's head cocked to the side. This demon suppressor sounded interesting. He'd need to do some investigating into it. He hoped Naruto was doing okay. I hope Senji is doing okay, Naruto sighed. All his attempts to blow his way out of the cell failed miserably. He couldn't mold chakra at all. He tried kicking at the bars, but without chakra enhancing his attacks, his body wasn't strong enough to do any damage at all. So Naruto had sat down and put his mental capacity to work at getting out of this situation. When he had surrendered, he had just wanted to find the prisoners. Well, he had found them, but he hadn't expected to be helpless. It was a weird sensation. He looked across at the dark-skinned teenage boy across in the next cell. Hey you Quat, he ventured. What's your name? The boy looked across at Naruto, his black eyes stark even in the dim light. I'm Nagi Mikihara. What's your name kid? Naruto Uzumaki Quat. He replied. Where are you from Nagi? I've never met someone who looks like you Quat. Naruto stated bluntly. Nagi looked intently at Naruto. Are you afraid of me Naruto? Does my color frighten you? Naruto scratched the back of his head. Well not really, I mean my friend Lee becomes red sometimes when he fights. That seems much scarier than you are right now, especially with the way Lee fights. Nagi stared incredulously at Naruto. Years of hatred and persecution, and he'd never met someone who had brushed aside his complexion so easily. I don't know where I'm from. I was raised by my adoptive parents in a village far from here, but decided to find my own way as soon as I could. Quat. Nagi replied earnestly. Naruto smiled at him. Well if you want, when we get out of here, you can come and be a part of my village. Quat. He lifted his voice for all the prisoners to hear. That goes for everyone. All are welcome in Tengoku. This was greeted by some murmuring. Nagi snapped at Naruto angrily. Stop saying foolishness like that. There is no rescue, there is no after here. We're going to be executed today and there's no escape from that fact. Quat. His face became sad. Sorry kid, there's just no way out. PSST Naruto, Senji's whispered voice almost echoed in the dungeon. You ready to make a move yet? I'm getting bored out here. Naruto looked up startled. Senji's voice came from a small opening to let some light in the cells. Senji, I can't mold any chakra. None at all. So I'm stuck for now. Quat. Naruto replied. Oh Quat. Senji exclaimed knowingly. Now it makes sense. Okay, I'll take care of that. You just be ready to make your move. Quat. With that Senji melted back into the street and took once again to the rooftops. He just needed to find someone who could show him where the demon suppressor was. Piece of cake. Naruto turned to the shocked Nagi. Offer is still open, think about it after. 30 minutes later Naruto, Nagi and a 5-member family of magic users were tied to wooden posts inside the huge cathedral. People were still filing in, anxious apparently to witness the cleansing. Your friend hasn't come through as yet. Quat. Nagi said, semi-panicked. Naruto assumed that anyone would be tied to a stake and about to be burned alive. He however felt fairly calm. He trusted Senji. He will, believe it. Nagi stared incredulously at Naruto again. He hoped he wasn't this cheerily optimistic all the time. The high priest and his attendants marched in behind the stakes. Brothers and sisters of the eternal flame, tonight we have come to witness once again the ritual that gives us everlasting life. The ritual that lifts up our spirits and brings us closer to our Lord Seti. He held up a large bronze staff with curling snakes on it. Naruto shuddered involuntarily as he thought of Orochimaru. These demons have confessed to me privately that they came here looking for souls to devour and turn against our Lord Seti. There were audible gasps from the crowd, along with cries of no and burn them and Apos. Naruto moved to speak but a guard stepped forward and clubbed him in the stomach with the back of his spear. Naruto spit out blood and doubled over as far as the binding ropes would let him. Anytime now Senji, he whispered under his breath. It took just 1 second. Over the sound of the crowd laughing and Naruto being hit, he heard a familiar whistle. The noise Naruto had come to know was the slash of Senji's blade. Naruto stayed perfectly still as the air ripple sliced into the ropes all around him. Senji appeared in the door to the cathedral. I'm still looking Naruto. You do what you can here until I can find it, okay? Senji called out before disappearing. Naruto nodded and took a fighting stance. He may not be able to mold chakra right now, but he was still a ninja and damn it if he was going to show these baka his taijutsu. Naruto, release me, I can help. Quat. Nagi said urgently. Naruto grabbed a spear from a still in shock guard and sliced the ropes holding Nagi. The head priest now snapped out of his own shock. Guards, call the defenders of Seti. Everyone, the demons are free. Many in the gathering of people screamed and made a run for the door. Some surged forward though, to recapture the demons. Naruto jumped and whirlwind kicked the first guard in the face, sending him reeling back into the arms of his colleague. Naruto landed crouched, spinning again and swiping the catching guard off his feet. He glanced over to see what Nagi was doing and paused for a second to stare in wonder. Nagi was dancing. There was no other way for Naruto to describe it. Nagi stepped left, then right, his back leg sweeping behind him, to some unheard rhythm in his head. As a guard approached Nagi bent at the waist and touched his palm to the floor, bringing the back leg up in an incredibly swift kick. He sent the guard flying. Nagi spun around and was back in the dance, staring down the other guards, trying to decide who to attack next. Naruto took the decision out of their hands and lunged at them. Senji slapped the man across the face again. Where is it? The next time I ask won't be pretty. The guard laughed and spat at Senji. Senji smiled and in a blink of an eye, severed the man's left hand. As he lay screaming, Tenshikage resheathed his sword. Are you going to make me ask again? A man can live with one hand, but none. Why, you wouldn't even make a proper beggar now, would you? Naruto managed to untie the other family in the melee. They however chose to try to escape instead of staying to help. Naruto was glad they did. The father didn't seem like much of a fighter, and Naruto didn't need to see any new orphans get created today. Nagi was holding his own for now, his dancing martial arts impressing Naruto whenever he had a chance to see it. There were many more guards than Naruto anticipated, however, hundreds poured into the cathedral. Naruto had to admit even he couldn't hold them off for much longer. He spun around and backhanded a guard across his face. He flipped backwards over a lunging spear. No, not long at all. Tenshikage stared at the metal box under the bell in the cathedral bell tower. He scratched his head. How do I turn this off? He shrugged and bent at the knees. Seconds later his sword sliced right through the machine where the words prototype, property of Dodo Kazahana, please return if found were printed. Naruto felt it, the surge of power coming back to him. It was as if someone had turned on a light switch. He took a breath and made 100 shadow clones. They all smiled at the stunned guards, then surged forward. Naruto glanced across at Nagi, who should have also gotten access to his chakra back. It was an amazing sight. Nagi spun and kicked the nearest guard. But his kick ended with him melting into the shadows on the ground. He emerged from another shadow to do a somersault kick and landed, once again disappearing completely into the shadows on the ground. Naruto had never seen anything like it. He knew Shikamaru could control his shadow, but this was something else. It was as if Nagi was a shadow. The high priest shouted once again. Kill them. Kill the demons. The guards surged forward with spears and swords and crossbows. Naruto gathered his chakra and pushed. His practice paying off immensely as a huge chunk of guards were flung backwards. He was thrown forward as a blast of fire hit him from behind. He could feel his scorched skin burn and sizzle, even as the Kyuubi chakra worked to heal him. He turned to see the high priest pointing his staff at Nagi. Burn demon! He shouted. Feel the miracle of Seti. Another long flame of fire burst from the staff. Nagi however melted into the shadows. Naruto grew angry. That was no miracle, that was chakra. You! Naruto raged at the man. You can use chakra. Why are you killing people like you? The man snarled at him. I am nothing like you. I serve the Lord Seti. He gives me the power to serve his will. He leveled the staff at Naruto and blasted at him. A ball of energy exploding the ground where Naruto was a second ago. Naruto hurried to the last place he saw Nagi disappear. Nagi, if you're here, still get out of the village now. And quat. Naruto's voice was steely. Get some distance away, I have something to finish here. The shadow to Naruto's left shifted slightly, then seemed to melt through the rock wall. Naruto turned back his full attention to the high priest, a little too late though, as the man hit him under the chin with the staff, sending him up into the air. He then blasted Naruto with an energy ball, cackling madly as he did it. Naruto was sent crashing through the ceiling of the cathedral and flying straight up into the evening sky. He could once again feel his skin start to heal even as he headed up into the sky. As he reached the peak of his ascent, he started to gather his chakra. He could feel the wind whipping at him and he almost felt as if it lent him some strength as well. He began to hurtle back down to earth, the village far below. He hoped Tenshikage was clear too. Tenshikage in fact was looking up at Naruto from the courtyard of the prison near the cathedral. He was covering for the exit of the other prisoners. They were all gone and he was just decimating guards when he looked up and saw Naruto plummeting. At first he was worried about his friend, falling from that height, then he cursed and ran, flash stepping as fast as he could away from the center of the village. Naruto knew a way to stop his fall from that height, but it would mean, he cleared the village gate just as he felt the chakra surge. Naruto had gathered an immense amount of chakra, and pushed down, using the technique he had used when they first arrived on the wind stream. The blast was immense. Huge hands of chakra flattened the stone buildings into rubble, dust erupting all around. The cackling of the high priest drowned out by the tumultuous destruction of the city. Like before, the blast created a cushion for Naruto to bounce off of, and flip to safety outside the blast area. It was still a long fall, but he channeled some chakra to his legs to help him land without breaking them. It left a small impact crater where he landed. The dust was still pluming into the evening sky when Tenshikage found Naruto. He was staring at the imprints in the landscape from a nearby hilltop. Two giant hands embedded in the ground, where the village had once stood. Nothing left but a few stone walls on the outskirts and a sign on a road that read sinners and demons beware and quat. Nagi materialized out of a nearby shadow and whistled. He looked from the destruction to Naruto. So, where exactly is this village of yours? Naruto, Nagi and Tenshikage trudged along the dirt road. Once again Naruto wished they could find a wind stream to take them home. They were a week, maybe more, away from Tengoku on foot. Tenshikage had immediately bonded with Nagi. They were all warriors at heart, so finding something in common was easy. I hate walking. And quat. Senji grumbled. His face lit up. Hey Naruto, how about we toss you into the air and see if we can't find a wind stream back home? Nagi grinned too, an evil light in his eyes. Naruto stepped backwards. They wouldn't. Nagi disappeared into the ground and Senji lunged forward in a flash step. Naruto began to Hiraishin away, laughing at the play, when two hands shot out of the shadow on the ground and held his ankles. Before he knew it, he was laying across the outstretched and interlocked arms of Nagi and Senji. Wait guys, I'm not sure. 3 The two teenagers shouted, bypassing both numbers 1 and 2. They shot Naruto far into the air. He waved his arms futilely, no stream up here, and began to plummet to earth. He was going to use his chakra push to brace his fall, but then he realized his friends were below him. He swung his legs below and pumped chakra into them, hoping to cushion as much of the landing as he could. Just before he hit the ground, a large hand reached between Nagi and Senji and grabbed Naruto by the back of his shirt, keeping him from hitting the ground. They swiftly looked at the oddly dressed large man who had appeared before them, and then at the large wagon rolling into the meadow behind him. Greetings, I am. The man began to speak. Naruto finished the sentence excitedly. The Magnificent Milford Mabry. Chapter 10, Three-Man Team. Naruto, Senji and Nagi sat quietly on top the wagon. It really was a magnificent vehicle, easily the size of a house. The wheels alone stood taller than a man. With brightly colored canvas and brass piping as a visible frame, it looked as ostentatious as the owner. The wheels turned again slowly, as Mabry snapped a whip at the enormous donkeys pulling the wagon. Mabry had greeted them warmly and explained to Naruto how he had met up with Tsunade and was working for Tengoku now. Naruto had greeted him warmly and gushed about how he remembered him when he was a child, and the magic show Mabry had put on. At the end of it, Mabry had told them he needed help setting up one piece of their supply line, and asked Naruto to come along. Naruto happily, yet in a serious manner, agreed. This was important to his new village, so it had to be done. Senji of course agreed. Nagi tagged along to learn more about his new friends. Mabry steered the wagon, thinking he hadn't really needed the help, but if he was going to be affiliated with Tengoku, he wanted to know what kind of man Naruto was growing up to be. This test would either settle his fears, or justify them. The wagon turned slowly down the path to the city of Green. Mabry called out to Naruto and the other teenagers. Naruto, kids, come down here. They clambered down off the wagon and landed on the ground next to the wagon driver's seat. Okay, Mabry began. This city is called Green. Here I will be meeting up with a major link in the food supply chain. However, I will also be putting on a show. I've been in this town before and there is a mobster here who will try to shake down our show. I sent my 2 aides to another city already to help with the supply link, so it's just you guys and me. I need you to protect me while I'm here. Naruto looked up at the almost 7-foot tall man with a grin. Sure, we'll protect you, Mr. Mabry. You're a citizen of Tengoku after all. Senji watched him a bit more slyly. Mabry did not look like the kind of man who needed protection. Senji had been around a lot of people, and the magnificent Milford Mabry was definitely a fighter. Nagi looked between Naruto, Senji, and Mabry. Something was up. Nagi had a good vibe from Naruto, but Mabry was up to something. Naruto suddenly had a startled expression on his face, which turned into a sad one, then into a smile. What's up, Naruto? Senji asked. Naruto smiled. Well, with you, me and Nagi, we're now a 3-man cell. I was just remembering the first team I was on, that's all. And quad. Naruto turned towards the town. Let's get this mission done and head home, okay? Tsunade watched in amusement as the Naruto clones went about cleaning the orphanage like a small army. She had already gotten over her surprise at how long they were lasting. Naruto was a near bottomless pit of chakra, and he had poured a lot into these so they would last for as long as he was gone. She had never been good with children, so she was very glad that Sakura, Shizune and surprisingly the big bruiser Guerrera, was there. He had shown to have a huge soft spot for children and they absolutely loved him. The White Tower's 3rd floor was almost complete. The water had been run to both it and the orphanage. Kazuna and Inari had chipped in to help install the wind turbines as well, and they all hoped to have electricity up and running within the week. Jiraiya had been making plans and drawing maps since Naruto had left. The creation of a new city required many things besides infrastructure. The village needed to have life. It needed to breathe and have a flow. Money needed to come into and out of the city. Food and supplies were already arranged with Mabry. Jiraiya was also working on the entry to the island. So far, despite all the clones searching, they had found only the one way up. Many rivers down were already mapped out, but no others back up had been discovered yet. He had started a complex set of seals along the tunnel to Tengoku. He was tying the seals to the blood of the residents. His intention was a drop of blood had to be given inside the White Tower before anyone could ride the river into the city. So basically you had to either be a resident, or a resident had to grant you access and bring a drop of your blood to the city first. Anyone who didn't and jumped in the river would be destroyed by a series of chakra traps. It wasn't perfect, but it would do for now. His spies had also sent along some information. Akatsuki was still quiet. No movements on their side, so Jiraiya still felt like he had some time before they became a threat. Also Konoha seemed to be in upheaval. Danzo had declared martial law, and was making advances into Iwagakure territory. A war was definitely brewing on that front. He sighed heavily. Tengoku was halfway around the world, but he was sure it would affect Naruto. However, this was no time to get involved in something like that. Not when they were now building a new life. Jiraiya looked at the list of things he wanted to do today. He steeled himself and performed the summoning jutsu. In a puff of smoke, a pair of old toads appeared on the desk. Pa, Ma, how are you? Jiraiya asked with a smile. Could be better, young Jiraiya. My hip has been giving me a lot of trouble, Pa Toad responded as he shifted slightly on the desk. Have you been eating properly? Ma Toad asked with concern. You look a little thin. Jiraiya grinned. I'm fine, Ma. I have something to ask you. Pa and Ma looked up with serious faces. There's this boy named Naruto ... and quat. Jiraiya started. He hoped his explanation would help convince them to start training him in the sage arts a little earlier than normal. Ladies and gentlemen, Mabry said at the top of his lungs to a quickly gathering crowd. Do you believe in magic? He flourished his arms and white doves flew from his previously empty hands. The crowd laughed appreciatively and clapped. Naruto could barely take his eyes off the captivating magician. He didn't really remember the specific act Mabry had done when he was a child, but he did remember the feeling of awe and wonder he felt. The crowd was clearly reacting in the same way. Naruto was so entranced by Mabry, that he noticed when the magician's eyes locked onto someone in the crowd and a strange look crossed his face. Naruto followed his gaze to a girl in the crowd. She wasn't looking at the show as such, instead she was very quietly passing in between people and pickpocketing them. Naruto looked sadly at her. Her dress was a simple one made of what looked like brown canvas, with a simple ribbon tied in her auburn hair. She had to be about 10 or 11 years old. Naruto spied Mabry glancing at her several times during his performance. She disappeared into the crowd again, only to reappear on the far side close to an alleyway. Mabry seemed completely engrossed in his latest magic trick now, and didn't seem concerned with the girl anymore. Naruto looked over to where Nagi and Senji were passing around with bowls for donations from the crowd for the magician. They hadn't seen the girl, and something about her made Naruto want to find out where she went. He slipped out of the crowd and into the alley where she had disappeared. Despite it being the middle of the day, the darkness in the alley was overpowering and oppressive. It actually gave him the urge to leave the alley far behind and forget his quest, but he pushed on through. As he walked further and further down the alleyway, that feeling of darkness grew stronger. He peeked around a corner to see the same girl handing wallets and cash over to a tall black-clad man. There were two other boys there, both also holding wallets and money. The strange man's clothing bothered Naruto. It was tattered and torn, a deep black that seemed to absorb the light around it. There was a sense of filth around the man whose face Naruto could not see under a head of long shoulder-length frizzy hair and a black top hat which was slightly askew. A deep throaty cackle escaped from the man as the little girl handed over the money. See how easy it was, Miran? That's a good girl. Stealing is easy, and now you can eat dinner. Maybe even get yourself a real dress. Tears were rolling down the little girl's face. She looked absolutely defeated and lost, as did the other children around the man. Naruto stepped into the alley, feeling his rage build up inside him. Hey you, leave them alone. The man looked up at Naruto and seemed genuinely startled. Who are you? How did you get in here? Naruto replied, don't mind that. Just step away from the girl. The man cocked his head to the side and pulled the girl into him, holding her there. He laughed and pointed at Naruto. A beam of black energy raced from his finger to hit Naruto square in the chest. Naruto flew back several feet to impact into the bare brick wall behind him. He fell to the ground in a heap of dust and brick fragments. Naruto pushed himself up, coughing a little blood. That hurt. Naruto felt like his chest was raw where the beam hit, but knew he was already healing from the blast. He stood up, much to the amazement of the man before him. Very few can take a shadow blast and live, much less stand back up. And quat. The man let go of the little girl and glided towards Naruto. His hair shifted from his face to reveal he had no face, just a bleached white skull. What are you, young one? The skullman asked as it got closer. Naruto felt a pang of fear grip him, and in his panic shoved a wind chakra blast towards the man. It hit him dead center yet didn't seem to faze him. He did however stop in his tracks and look down at where he was hit. Ah, wind. Interesting. You must have some ability to be able to withstand my attack. Ji-hoon. We'll soon find out what it is. Naruto kicked out, only to have his leg caught by the man and thrown aside. Ice-like fingers wrapped around Naruto's throat and the skull came right up to his face. Tiny red lights deep in the eye sockets glowered at Naruto. So tell me your secrets, young ninja. Quad. The voice growled at him. Naruto felt his skin getting hot and his eyes changing. When he opened them, his iris were slit and a pale orange glow had overtaken his body. With a voice Naruto knew to not be his own, he growled. Get your hands off me. A sudden blast of orange fire and the man shrieked and flew backwards, clutching his hand. Naruto stood there, feeling the rage inside him, felt himself losing control. He struggled to push it back down, to bury it again and lock it away. The man's hand had withered away, ashes still falling from where it once was. He looked over at Naruto. "QB," was all he said, spitting it out with disgust and fear. The man shrieked once more and disappeared in an explosion of black dust and smoke. Naruto was left panting, struggling with his rage. The 4 children approached him, 3 boys and 1 girl. Naruto noticed they had no fear as they approached him. "Stay away," Naruto growled. "Just give me a second." Naruto held up his hand and pushed the anger back down. The children just looked at him curiously. After a few seconds Naruto stood up and looked around. "Yup, that freak is gone." He looked down at the children in front of him. The girl, Mirin the Skullman had called her, was very pretty even though she was grimy. Her eyes were what caught Naruto off guard. They were a shimmering gold. The 2 boys also came close enough for Naruto to look them over. "What are your names?" he asked. The first boy to speak up looked like he was also 10. He had shockingly blue hair which was spiked very similarly to Naruto's. "I am Shuron. Why did you scare Mr. Ji-hoon away? Mr. Ji-hoon looks after us." Mirin started to cry. "What will we do now? Will Mr. Ji-hoon come back, Jen?" she asked the second boy. This one had a strip of cloth over his eyes and a short staff in his hand, clearly used to guide him as he walked. "I don't know, Mirin. We will just have to wait and see." His voice was pained as he said this. Naruto looked at them puzzled. "Why are you sad to see that monster go? He was making you steal to survive." Siren looked at Naruto with anger. "What do you know about growing up an orphan? You think it's easy to live on the streets? Mr. Ji-hoon cared about us. He made sure no one came near us." Naruto grew angry. "No, he used you. I was an orphan too. I've met people like him before. Well, maybe not like him cause he was a monster, but I met people who wanted to use you and that's all you were to them. A thing to be used and thrown away." The other boy Jen spoke up. "It doesn't matter. Once he's here, we're safe. Once we do what he asks, no one harms us. You should leave." Naruto stared at them incredulously. "Are you joking? Is this the life you want? Stealing and scrounging for someone else? No, I can offer you more than this." Mirin looked up at him through her tear-filled eyes. "What do you mean?" Naruto straightened his back. "Would you 3 like to come with me to my new village? We are still building it, but we will eventually be the best and strongest hidden village in the world. We're starting a warrior academy for those who want to fight, a normal school for those who don't. I offer you food, shelter, a life, a new life. And quad." The children stared at him. No one had ever offered them anything that sounded so good before. "It's not real. You want something from us," Siren said, stepping back. "No one would make us an offer like that without wanting something in return." "I do want something in return," Naruto said, looking at them with steely blue eyes. "I want you to be free and happy. I was alone too. I made the choice to not go down the path of darkness. I lost a friend to that path. Come with me and find a new life. If you don't like it, you can leave at any time. You have my word on that." The children looked at each other. Even Jen moved his head towards the others, making it seem like he was seeing them. Jen actually looked over at Naruto. "You're not human either. You're like Mr. Ji-hoon. So if he's so bad, why should we trust you?" Naruto was shocked. As he was about to ask why the boy thought he wasn't human, angry voices poured into the alley behind him. He noticed that the dark feeling that made him not want to enter the alley had left with Ji-hoon. Around the corner came a mob of angry robbed citizens. "There they are!" one man shouted. "Those damn pickpocket kids. Let's show them." Another growled as the mob charged. Naruto stood in front of them and started to physically block the attacks using nothing but taijutsu. He blocked, spun, kicked and punched, keeping the mob at bay while the children stood behind him. Naruto didn't want to harm the citizens. They did have a right to be mad, but at the same time, he didn't want them harming the kids. A few snuck past Naruto though on the far wall of the alley and were rushing the kids. As Naruto turned to head them off and defend the kids, he saw Mirin move in a blur and dodge the attacks, appearing high on a ledge in the alley. Siren jumped up and became a geyser of water that bounced from wall to wall, until also landing on the ledge next to Mirin and transformed back into himself. Jen, though, was an artist. Naruto felt it when it happened, but he couldn't explain it. Jen slammed the end of his stick down into the ground and released a burst of chakra in a circle around him. He then dodged and ducked and weaved his way through the crowd in a way no blind boy should be able to. He didn't harm a single person but ended up on top a garbage bin and jumped from ledge to ledge until he too was sitting high up next to Mirin. Naruto paused for a second and smirked. The mob had paused as well. They're definitely joining our warrior academy, he thought. Naruto laughed and ran towards the wall where they were. His strides took him on a dead run at the brick wall, then he leapt up and began to run up the side of the wall. They're freaks. One villager shouted. All of them. Let's get out of here. Naruto laughed as the last of them left. It was sort of nice to have a fight where he didn't have to kill anyone. Well done, Naruto. And quat. Naruto looked up to see Mabry, Senji and Nagi looking down at them from the rooftop of the very building they were on. Naruto scowled. How long have you guys been up there? Senji rubbed the back of his head and smiled with his eyes closed. Well, we got here just as that Ji-hoon guy disappeared. I held Nagi back and explained we should give you some time to calm down. Nagi laughed. Good speech about the new life at Tengoku. I think you're getting better at selling it to us strays you pick up. Mabry nodded, a huge grin on his face. Naruto was everything Tsunade had said he had become. Earnest, honest, caring and strong. Exactly what a leader should be. He had sided with the right guys for once. Kids, what Naruto offered you is real. He said pointing to Nagi, is also a new kid picked up. We're all headed to that village Naruto spoke of. And quat. Mabry's eyes narrowed. No child should live like this. I myself run a home for orphans. You would have heard of it probably if you've been on the streets for any length of time. Jen looked up at him. You're Milford Mabry? The magician? Mabry nodded. Jen turned his head to Naruto. You're Naruto? The city destroyer? The Shinigami? The protector? Whoa, Senji whistled. That's a new one, Naruto. The protector. How do you like that one? Naruto grinned like an idiot with a smile that threatened to split his face in two. I guess Jiraiya's spy network has been hard at work spreading rumors, Naruto said, scratching the back of his head. The three children, though they were only 3 years younger than Naruto, he couldn't help but think of them as children, nodded to each other. Shiran spoke up. We've heard of you, Mr. Mabry. We'd go with you. We've also heard of Naruto, some of it good things, so we'll trust you. Mabry nodded. Great. Now a quick note here, guys. And quat. He looked at Naruto, Senji, and Nagi. You should get ready for a battle. Oh, I'd say in the next minute at most. What? Naruto asked. Yup, you see, I didn't realize that the Neferi work this far north. They're usually much lower south, closer to the land of the dead. Must be looking to add to their arsenal. What does that mean? Senji asked, clutching his blade. The Neferi are half demons. They come from the land of the dead, which is a huge island far south of here. They corrupt people and claim their souls, make them their slaves, subordinates, warriors, etc. They can only claim a soul that's been completely corrupted. I imagine this one, Mr. Ji-hoon, would have eventually asked these kids to kill someone. The act of murder splits the soul. He'd have been able to completely claim these kids after that. What does that have to do with a battle? Nagi asked, feeling a cold wind start to blow. Well, he's put a lot of effort into these three. I'm guessing the time it takes him to find reinforcements won't be long, so he'll be coming back to finish off Naruto. The wind was now a gale, and dark clouds had gathered overhead. Wonderful, Naruto muttered. Shadows started to come down the alleyway. Oh, one more thing, Mabry shouted out. Only demon magic can kill a demon. Kinjutsu, forbidden arts and the like, you're not likely going to do much damage with a sword. He looked at Senji, or capoeira. He looked at Nagi. He reached into his magnificently brilliant coat and pulled out a small dagger that was intricately designed with carvings. He tossed it to Senji. Here, use this. And quat. He reached again into his jacket and pulled out a pair of white gloves with runes written on them. He tossed them to Nagi. Put these on. As he did that, voices and screams echoed down the alleyway. What about me? Naruto shouted over the din. Mabry smiled. You're a walking, talking demon exterminator. Just do your thing, Naruto. Mabry struck a heroic pose and grabbed the three children in his grasp. Meet you back at the wagon in 15 minutes. Hurry up, cause we won't wait for you. In a flash of stage magic, Mabry was gone with the kids, leaving Naruto, Senji and Nagi to face the suddenly very visible horde of various monsters, demons and warriors. Crap, Senji said and moved in with his dagger as Nagi hurriedly slipped on his gloves and Naruto took a ready stance. The demon horde looked like something out of a nightmare. Gnashing teeth, fangs and rotted flesh. Naruto's eyes opened wide as the bodies spilled into the narrow alley. The oppressive feeling was back, and a loud cackle over the din belied the presence of Mr. Ji-hoon. Nagi and Senji appeared on either side of Naruto. Senji held the dagger in his hand with distaste. What the hell am I gonna do with this small thing? Pinprick them to death? Senji asked disgustedly. Nagi fingered the gloves. Capoeira is mostly kicks, couldn't he give me some demon killing shoes? Naruto looked grim. I'm not sure I can control my... He glanced at Nagi, who didn't know his secret as yet, resident either. Nagi glanced at him and laughed. Senji already filled me in. He seems quite proud of what you're doing there, so you don't think it will help? The first zombie lurched forward. Senji stepped in front the trio and plunged the dagger into the brain of the carnivorous walking corpse. The creature shrieked and fell to the floor convulsing for a few seconds before it lay still. Senji stepped back and looked with renewed disgust at the black tar-like blood that stained his dagger. A tall beast that was neither human nor bull yet both reached for Nagi. He melted into the shadows and popped back out in a spinning kick. The kick landed solidly, pushing the beast into Naruto, who was now fighting off two zombies of his own. Naruto and the beast went tumbling down, the beast pinning Naruto under him. Naruto grunted and pushed an air blast into the beast's stomach. It erupted in a fountain of flesh and tar-like blood. Naruto heaved and threw the monster to the side. The pair of zombies he had been battling lunged for his neck, but Senji backhanded one while Nagi unleashed a punch on the other that caved in its skull. The one Senji hit came back, but a quick dagger to the head and it too fell. More monsters piled into the alley. Naruto assessed quickly. The narrow alley means they can't attack us more than 2 or 3 at a time. Senji and Nagi, if you can hold them off long enough, I'll try to call on some of the Kyuubi's chakra for a mass effect jutsu. The bull monster began to get back up despite having its chest blown out, but Nagi punched it in the face, smashing its brain. The next wave of attackers rushed them, 3 skeleton warriors with swords. Naruto dug deep inside, and felt that familiar feeling. The rage, anger, hate. He felt it like a pool, just waiting there. He tried to let just a little rise to the surface, just a tiny amount. Red chakra erupted over his body like flames. Nagi and Senji were both dispatching the undead creatures in front of them while Naruto raged at the chakra building up in him. His eyes were closed tightly as he sought to control it. He opened them and felt the difference. His irises were slit and the raw energy was flowing through him. Nagi and Senji were doing their best, but the creatures started to pile up and it made it difficult to move. The horde had begun to clamber over the fallen. I'm ready, move behind me. And quat. Naruto shouted over the roaring and screaming creatures. Nagi and Senji both moved in a flash behind Naruto, who was already gathering as much chakra as he could. Naruto could physically feel the difference between his own and the Kyuubi's chakra. He had done it once before, he hoped he could do it again. He focused on internalizing the chakra and mixing it with his. He felt the violent rejection at first, then the merging of the chakras. He exhaled and pushed forward with both palms, sending a shock wave of mixed demon and human chakra slicing through the horde of monsters. The result was catastrophic. When the dust settled, only one shadow moved. Ji-hoon emerged from the ground, passing through the cobblestone as if he were nothing more than a ghost. Curse you, Kyuubi. Magnon shall hear of your treachery, turning against your own kind. Ji-hoon spit at Naruto. In a puff of black smoke and amidst a screeching noise, he disappeared. Naruto, Senji and Nagi stood panting. Black blood stained all of them, a mounting of bodies almost blocking them into their end of the alley. When we get back to Tengoku, I am getting a damn demon killing sword instead of this children's toy, Senji said spitefully. Nagi just nodded breathlessly. Naruto sighed, feeling very drained. 20 minutes since the fight began, a very tired and battle-weary trio of Tengoku warriors emerged from the crumbling alley to find that the wagon had already left. They would need to run to catch up to it. On the ground where the wagon had been was a note. Too slow. Work on your speed. Catch up down the northern road. We're going straight to Tengoku. Our new guests are Miran Tatsumi, Shiron Basha, and Genosuke Daguri. Pick up some meat for dinner tonight. The magnificent Milford Mabry. The trio of friends sighed and headed on down the road after Mabry. After a brief stop at the market for some meat, that is. Konoha again. Lee told himself as he launched forward. This was his 20th sprint through the length of Konoha. He had increased his weights to the point that at 20 laps, he could barely stand up. But that was the point, to push himself. His feet moved in quick succession. To a normal person watching, it may have looked like a quick jog, but anyone of Jounin level would see how much Lee was struggling to move. He passed by Ino's flower shop and saw for the 20th time her sitting by her bedroom window above the shop in a trance-like state. He knew Ino had been practicing jumping from body to body using her mind switch technique. Usually at this stage of his run she'd try to keep pace with him. This time was no different. The first person he saw on the sidewalk turned and smiled at him. Let's go again, Lee and quat. He kept running as fast as he could, inspired by Ino's hard work. A few steps further down, a greengrocer turned around and smiled at him. Come on, slowpoke, can't you keep up? Lee grinned and pushed harder. And so it continued until Ino couldn't reach any further and had to go back to her body to rest. Lee made it to the end of Konoha in a few minutes and stopped. He leaned against a stone wall and dry heaved. His body was being pushed to his limit. But he knew it would work. He would get stronger, faster. He looked out into the training ground closest to where he was standing. He could make out Ten and Neji doing similar exercises. They were all doing them. All the Konoha Jinan and Chunin on the plot. They were getting stronger in preparation for the day they overthrew Danzo. Elsewhere, Kakashi looked around his house. He sighed at the collection of brightly colored books on his bookshelf. At least when the Anbu had searched his place they hadn't destroyed it. They'd left his books too. It helped he was a former commander of the Anbu and they for the most part didn't believe he was guilty either. He hefted the small bag he had packed and strung it over his back. He took one last look around. I won't be back for a while, house. Don't fall apart on me. I promise I'll get someone to clean you once a week. And quat. He said to no one in particular. He stopped at the small shrine he had for his father, the White Fang of Konoha. He lit incense and nodded. Sai Tengoku, huh? Nice name for a village. And quat. He smiled under his mask and disappeared from his house, and the village. Well, it looks like you've made it to the end of part 3 too. What if Naruto created his own village? Anyways, I hope all of you have a wonderful day/night. Bye.